Hello everyone. My name is Patrick Quirk and I'm excited to be able to share with you the experience I've had over the past couple of years in building out an IT project management office for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. In 2017, the governor signed an executive order which, among other things, established an Office of Project Management for the Commonwealth and charged it with oversight over large and complex projects across the executive branch. This was subsequently put into regulation in 2018, and I was brought in that July to build out the PMO. So today I'm going to walk you through the challenges that we faced, share with you the results that we've achieved to date, and then walk you through our approach about how we got here. We'll finish up with a demo of the actual system that the Commonwealth has in place today, including some of the reports that are available within that system, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So let's dive in by starting with the challenges we faced. I'd like to keep this interactive, so if you would, please participate in chat by doing the following. Given the challenges listed on the slide, post in the chat which one you feel is the biggest challenge for your particular organization. While you all find the chat feature and start sharing your responses for others, we'll dive into what we faced within the Commonwealth. So per legislation, our very broad challenge was to establish oversight for large and complex IT projects across the executive branch. For those of you not familiar with the structure of Kentucky state government, there are 12 executive branch cabinets, each with their own budget and leadership. So very much 12 independent organizations in a lot of ways. The Commonwealth Office of Technology, which is where the Office of Project Management was placed, is headed by the state CIO, but primarily performs a centralized IT infrastructure function. Each of the 12 cabinets typically performs their own IT projects, often with their own IT staff. Previously, there was no collaboration between the COT and the cabinets on their IT project spend beyond COT providing infrastructure and security services. In addition to disparate organizations, the size, scope, and complexity of IT projects varies widely across those organizations. Typical projects for some organizations may be a few $100,000, while others may typically have $10 million to $100 million plus dollar projects. Some cabinets perform most of their projects with their own internal IT teams doing custom application development, while others prefer to outsource their projects to vendors, which could do custom development or provide commercial off-the-shelf or COTS solutions. From a PM perspective, while one agency has a very mature agile approach to application development with an internal development team, there's another organization that has a less mature approach, and most of the agencies actually use some form of waterfall approach. Truly, there was no one-size-fits-all from either a methodology or a tool perspective across the executive branch cabinets within the state of Kentucky. So finally, there was no cost recovery model established for the PMO. So being a cost center, budget was limited. So fun stuff. Let's move on to what we've been able to achieve to date given these challenges. The most obvious result for the Commonwealth is that we've tripled the Commonwealth's awareness of IT project spend. Back in 2017-2018, if you had called up Frankfurt and said, hey, how many IT projects does the Commonwealth have, and what's the value of that portfolio, we wouldn't have had a really good answer. Our best guess at the time would have been about $350 million worth of open IT projects. Today we know that there is typically over $1 billion worth of IT projects open at any point in time for the Commonwealth. More impactful than just awareness of the size of the portfolio is that we know that about 20% of those projects, or roughly $200 million worth of projects, is either in a yellow or red health status at any point in time. Further, we have details on the issues for those projects, so the cabinet leadership and the CIO can not only have visibility about the portfolio, but they can see the details of issues with action items and determine if their assistance is needed to resolve those issues. PM maturity scores. I explained these shortly, but we've seen measured improvement in the rigor of project management performed across the executive branch. Here's an outcome I didn't actually plan for initially. We had multiple enterprise functions wanting to use the project data once we started collecting it. For example, our enterprise system change management team came to us and asked if we could tell them when projects are planning to do a cutover to production so they can cross-check that against their change tickets and their forward change calendar. So we created a report for them that would provide information from the project schedule tasks that had keywords like go live, promotion to production, those sorts of things, and found that they were not able to look at the tickets which they had open, which were typically open within 2 weeks of a code promotion, but they could look much further out and identify conflicts with the change calendar for things such as blackout windows or other significant changes to the environment. And it was nice that shortly after doing that, and by having some of our project managers talk, we were able to uncover that we had multiple projects planning to do some very significant cutovers on the same weekend. We're able to work with those project teams to spread those out. So kind of an unexpected benefit from having this sort of data. But once you collect this data and can share what everyone is planning to do, it allows people to make better decisions. So those are some of our accomplishments, but how did we get here? As we move on to the approach, please do use the chat feature to share any thoughts, note any questions you have for the Q&A session, or just say hi to other folks that you know participating in the webinar today. So we started with a clear understanding of why the PMO was being established. I'll detail that why on the next slide, but the why went hand in hand with taking some time to listen and learn from each of the cabinets. Before we put anything into place, we took the time to go meet with the IT leadership from each cabinet, and we discussed two things. First, we wanted to share why we were establishing a PMO. We understood that we'd get a certain level of participation and accuracy of data if folks understood the PMO was just a mandate, but that we'd get a much better participation and accuracy of data if folks understood why the PMO was being mandated. Secondly, I wanted to understand what was working well at each agency and what wasn't working well, and made sure that each cabinet understood that we weren't wanting to take control away from them, but to support them in driving projects to successful outcomes. After having heard from the agencies, we started to establish standards and reporting requirements for project managers across the enterprise. We'll dive into those into subsequent slides as well. As we implemented those expectations, we established ongoing training and coaching practices to help individual project managers and organizations improve project management maturity. The last approach concept I want to share with you today is that we took an iterative approach. We didn't try to push out a system and expectations for a fully mature project management environment across all 100 plus open IT projects at once. Rather, we started with a set of expectations to make incremental improvement from where we were at that point in time, and then add improvements to those on a quarterly basis. I've been a fan of Simon Sinek's Start With Why for a long time, and have found it helpful in terms of building motivation for strategic objectives. I use this slide to communicate the why for a PMO, and I always start that conversation with the strategy pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is vision, or where the organization wants to go. You break that vision down into mission and then into strategic objectives, getting more tactical as you go down. Vision, mission, and strategic objectives are all intended to drive change to the organization, and the way that you drive change is by executing projects so that the bottom of the pyramid is a set of portfolios, programs, and projects that are all defined in order to achieve the strategic objectives. Since organizations want their strategic visions and strategic objectives to be realized, they want successful projects. And we all know how you get successful projects. We manage them effectively. Now, we all know that effectively managing projects isn't easy, so we need processes, best practices, standards, checks and balances to ensure projects have successful outcomes. That's where the Enterprise PMO comes in, to ensure that we are effectively managing projects across the organization so that our vision, mission, and strategic objectives can be realized. From the strategy pyramid, We further explain the why via the PM maturity stack. When you start from scratch like we did, you have to first establish an inventory of projects. That involves identifying the projects in the portfolio, the project managers managing those projects, and starting to collect data about the projects. Once you have the inventory, you can move up a rung and start to implement reporting about those projects on a regular basis, which allows a certain level of decision making to take place. Moving up that stack, you start to address professionalism of the project managers. Are they experienced? Are they certified? Do they have support? In short, are they able to effectively manage projects? Moving up another level is practice standards for project management. That is establishing some things that are consistent across all projects. For example, are all projects defining scope? Are they defining requirements? Are they creating test cases and performing testing? Practice standards can be defined either specific to a methodology like Agile or Waterfall, or they can be methodology agnostic. Once you have practice standards, you can implement quality measures to quantify how well projects apply those practice standards and related KPIs. At the top of the stack, you get to predictability about projects, which is what leadership really wants out of a PMO. Leadership's why for having a PMO is to drive predictability around the IT projects that they are performing. We want to know how likely a project is to be successful given what is happening within the project today, so that we can choose to continue on, course correct, or cancel the project. And I would generally end the conversation about why with a little personal anecdote. I would share that with folks that in my years in and out of Frankfurt working on different projects over the past 20 years, one thing it always struck me and it was painful from a project management perspective. I would see the state investing in the same 5, 10, 20 or more $1 million projects over and over and over again. They would keep funding the same project, it would fail, and then we would fund it again, and it would fail. And the part that was really frustrating as both a taxpayer and a project management professional is that we wouldn't stop that project after maybe having spent $5 million out of the $20 million budget. We would spend all $20 million, throw our hands up at the end and say, oh goodness, this didn't work. When we knew there were plenty of people on that team that knew well before then that project wasn't going to work. But we would continue to have that same outcome over and over again. So the opportunity for me to come in and establish a PMO was really personal, both from a citizen taxpayer perspective as well as a project management professional, to get these done right the first time. And if it wasn't going well, let's stop it after we spent $5 million instead of all $20 million and start again, and not keep spending the same $20 million over and over with nothing to show for it. So as we move on from the why to establishing project management expectations, please do drop any questions or comments in chat and we'll address those during the Q&A time. We took 3 approaches to establishing project management expectations across the enterprise. The first was documenting a project management framework. You may recall that I said no one-size-fits-all for IT projects at the Commonwealth. So how did we craft a framework? Well, we only standardized elements of project management critical to establishing consistent reporting across projects. For us, that meant establishing common terminology, including defining a set of project lifecycle phases, health status, high-level financial data, etc. We left flexibility everywhere else. For example, if an agency wanted to have a 5-point scale for how they quantify risk impact, that was fine. They just had to map that to our 3-point scale for reporting purposes. In short, we let agencies keep doing what was working well for them while establishing some norms for the reporting purposes. Our next step was, based upon the framework, to establish project reporting at the enterprise level. This involved implementing a tool for collecting those reports. We selected Microsoft Project Online, which you'll see in the demo shortly. Since Project Online is a sophisticated project management tool, agencies were free to use it as their project management tool. But for agencies that already had well-established tools and processes built around those tools, we didn't require that they change what they were doing or the tools that they were using, but only required that they provide the required reporting data in Project Online on a monthly basis. In some cases, this required purely manual data entry. In other cases, we were able to streamline how the agency provided data to some extent. More important than the tool, though, was the review process we set up. We didn't just ask for data and dump it into a report. We wanted to ensure that that data was actually used and that agencies understood the need for the data to be accurate because it was being looked at. Once agencies reported their data, the PMO would sit down for a couple of days each month and pore over the data for each of the 100 plus projects. So very intense couple of days of just doing nothing but reviewing the project data. The outcome of that effort would be an email to that agency's IT leadership and to the project managers for that agency with any questions, comments, observations about the projects. Those items could range from missing data elements to questions about why the project is reported as 80% complete but only 10% of the budget has been spent, or anything that just didn't seem to make sense or where we had some questions about what we were seeing in the data. In some cases, such apparent discrepancies were accurate. In other cases, they uncovered a need to correct the data, or in the really impactful situations, they drove conversations within that agency about course correction that was needed on the project. In the days immediately after the PMO's review of the projects, we would meet with each agency's IT leadership and the PMO and the project managers in a short 20-minute meeting, and we would do two things. First, we reviewed the CIO's report and made sure that there was nothing surprising to that agency on that report. Second, we had a discussion on the observations that were emailed. This went a long way to improving the data that was entered monthly because everyone understood that it was actually being looked at and in the spirit of improving project outcomes. Finally, we would review the portfolio with the CIO with a focus on observations that may warrant the CIO's action or awareness. After the first couple of review cycles, we introduced the PM maturity model to the enterprise. The purpose of this was to identify at the organization level the level of PM maturity typically being performed on the projects within that organization. We took a CMMI approach where a 5 is typically a level of continuous improvement and defined criteria for each level across a number of project management practices, as you can see in the tables. Of note, we set level 3 in green because that was the baseline target we wanted for all organizations. Level 4 and Level 5 were only targets for organizations which regularly undertake the very large or complex projects that warrant that level of project management. The rollout of the PM maturity model aided in another jump in the accuracy of data being reported on the monthly basis, but more importantly, helped us identify where there was an opportunity for training and coaching, which then dictated the types of training and coaching sessions the PMO provided. All right, I'm sure you've seen enough slides at this point, so let's move on to the demo of the solution the Commonwealth has in place today. For this demo, we'll walk you through the Commonwealth's implementation of Project Online, along with some of the Power BI reports in place today. When users log into Project Online, they come to what we call the PM Community Portal. As we've mentioned, ongoing training and coaching was a key approach for us, and establishing a community of project managers who can interact with each other, provide resources to each other, etc., is something we felt that was a valuable tool for project managers. As you can see, in addition to a discussion board, there's a calendar of upcoming learning opportunities, a collection of tools and templates, best practice documents, etc. So I'm going to switch over to our test environment to just show you some of the details of projects.
I'm going to pick one more for fun, CP data. So we open up this project. This list of projects will be visible to the project managers, and will show them any projects to which they have access to. So most project managers won't see nearly the list that we can see as admins of the system, but would only see the projects that are relevant to them. So as we come into a particular project, at the top of the project section, with the name of that project, you will get a list of where that project is in the project life cycle. So you can see that this is in the initiation phase. As you move through the project life cycles, the subsequent phases of planning, execution, closing will all become available. One of the nice things about this is that there are requirements for moving from phase to phase. As you move from initiation, there are certain pieces of information that you have to have completed in order to move on to the planning phase. So the project manager can see the status of those down here and see if there's anything that they need to complete before progressing to the next phase in the life cycle. As we drill down into what we call the project detail pages, which is this subset of pages underneath the project name, you get a series of metadata about the project. This first page, the project details page, is information that needs to be put in when the project is set up, but doesn't necessarily need to be updated on a monthly basis, because this project metadata doesn't change very often. You note that we've got asterisks here for the required fields, but a lot of these fields are optional fields for either certain types of projects or for agency use. For example, if they've got an agency project code, if the agency wants to tag that for their own reporting purposes, they can put that in here. So we try to make the tool accommodating not just for the required information that we were looking for from the enterprise project reporting, but as a useful tool for the agencies as well. On the financial information page, we see we've kept this very high level. We've got an actual to date cost column and an implementation budget column. So the budget would be set up initially, but again shouldn't have to be updated too often, as that should be slowly changing. But the actuals to date are fields that we look for the project managers to update on a monthly basis. The project health indicators is another page that we look for the project managers to update on a monthly basis, and it just has your basic red, yellow, green health indicator. Those are very subjective, and based upon the selection of red, yellow, green for budget, scope, and schedule, the system will automatically calculate an overall health status. The only other required field on this page is the overall health summary, and that does show up on the CIO's report, and it's an opportunity for the project team to communicate information about that overall health status. So especially if it's in a red or yellow health status, that's an opportunity for the project manager to convey to the CIO or other leadership, here's why it's in that status, so that they can be aware of, is this something I already know about? Is this something I need to learn more about? But to give a little bit of color commentary about that overall health status. The last project detail page is the project schedule, and while we advise most of our project managers to actually manage their schedule in the desktop version of Microsoft Project, because it's just a much better user interface, a lot easier to work with. If folks have a fairly small schedule, maybe they're just reporting their milestones because they have all their project details in another tool like a Jira, they may just come in here and update some milestones for their project, and can just come in and update that project just like they normally would in the desktop version. With each project comes a project site. This is what you may be familiar with as a SharePoint site, but it's specific to each project. There's a place to store documents, notes, a calendar for the project, and these are all optional for the project teams to use if they should choose to do so. The only required pieces of information that we have within the project site are the risk and the issue logs. every month that we do look for risks to be identified. We believe that all projects do have risks, so we look for multiple risks to be logged about the project. And then the issues, while there may not be any active issues at all points in time in a project, if there are issues open, we look for there to be action items updated on a monthly basis associated with each of the open issues. All right, I'm going to flip back over to our production environment and go through the CIO report with you that we've developed. So on our reports page, we've got a number of Power BI reports that, based upon permissions, project managers may have access to. And then there's also a high-level little graphic that comes up about the overall portfolio. So we're going to go into the CIO's report. With it both being a Microsoft tools, it is nice that these can be embedded just within the Project Online interface. But what I typically find useful is to open it in Power BI. It allows you to go more full screen with what you're looking at within the tool. So we're actually going to pop that out into a full screen view, so hopefully it's visible to everyone. And as this loads up, what you'll notice is across the top, we get a series of metrics about the overall environment. You get see the total budget, the number of projects that we have, and then you get down into some graphics. This is our typical red, yellow, green on the overall health status of the projects in the portfolio. Mentioned the different cabinets that we have within the Commonwealth, so you can see not only by dollar value or the size of the portfolios of those projects, but you can also toggle that for the number of projects. You can see here on the number of projects, the finance cabinet has 32 projects, CHFS has 25. If we look at that back to the budget side, you'll see CHFS, their value of their portfolio is actually larger than the finance cabinet, though, so tell you that they typically do projects that are larger in size than the finance cabinet takes on. We also have a graphic here for the high impact issues by cabinet. So generally these will align with the number of projects that the cabinet is facing, but sometimes we'll see that a cabinet just has a number of issues pop up, and that will become apparent, and we can filter the report by any of these graphics and dive into what's going on with those particular projects. So one of our challenges as we were coming up with how to create the CIO report was that we have over 100 active projects at any point in time within the Commonwealth, and so trying to figure out how to best display those 100 projects in a meaningful way to on a single report was a little bit challenging. So this was our approach. So we started off with a section that lists just the program. So if a project is flagged as a program, it's a collection of related projects. Those get their own little section on this report. And we listed those by the worst overall health status. So if your overall health status is in red, you're right up at the top of the report, so it draws the reader's eyes to that particular project. Here you can see the overall health summary that gives the reader an opportunity to get an idea of, is this in a red health status because of something I know about, or do I need to get more information about that? The next section on the report is projects with a changed health indicator status. So we wanted to draw attention to any projects that were changing in some way, shape, or form. So if they were trending either positively or negatively, we thought that was important to draw the CIO's attention to. So again, this is sorted by the worst overall current health status, but you can see where it's trending from the prior month. So this one went from yellow to red, so it's trending in a negative direction. Gives an opportunity to see if we know what's going on with that particular project. Same thing as you go down the list here, you can see one's coming from red to yellow, so that's a positive. Some going from green to yellow, and some going from yellow to green. So just a way to differentiate these 100 plus projects and give a look at what's actually changed in the environment. The final section is those projects that have kept their same health indicator status from the prior month. So again, we sorted this by the worst overall health status to the best, and so your reds are up at the top. we will tell you that very often we don't get down to the greens in our reviews because those are the ones that have been trending well typically, unless there's a particular observation around those. But your eye is definitely drawn, your focus is drawn to the projects that are in the red status and may be stuck because they've been in that status for at least 2 months at this point. But that was our approach to figuring out how to best display 100 plus projects in a meaningful way. With the CIO's report, we also have an issues tab on the report. One of the things I like about this is we've got this word cloud here, and this looks at all of the high impact issues across all of the projects in the portfolio. So it's the first time that the Commonwealth has had an opportunity to see if there are some issues that may be impacting multiple projects across multiple organizations. So as it's not surprising, COVID-19 is one of our most common terms that's listed as a high impact issue. So we can look at these on a month-to-month basis and see if there's any terms that pop up and see if there's maybe some sort of systemic root cause across these that if the CIO can take some sort of action, provide some leadership towards, we can resolve project issues across multiple projects, increasing the likelihood of success for projects across multiple cabinets versus each cabinet trying to figure these out, each project team trying to figure these out independently when there really might be some sort of systemic issue going on. So with that, we've completed our presentation for you today. Hope you found our experience in building out an enterprise IT PMO informative. And at this point, we are ready to open things up for Q&A.